So your boy isn't the luckiest guy in the world, but he was lucky enough to win a raffle and join the Switch 2 experience in New York City. And as proof, besides all the video footage you're about to see, got a little swag. So today we're going to talk about the Switch 2 experience in New York, my initial thoughts about the Switch 2, and my predictions for the system after its launch coming in early June. So let's dive right in and talk about the Switch 2 experience.
So this is Pirates Gaming, and we have infiltrated the Switch 2 experience here in New York City to try and get our hands on the Switch 2 and see what it's all about. So let's dive in here, give it the full experience. We'll break it down and give you some first impressions on the brand new hardware. By the way, when a Nintendo, do as Nintendo does. Let's go.
We ended up taking a train into Grand Central Station and then walking over to the Switch 2 experience. We showed up, we waited in a little bit of a line. They would let a group in at a time. They gave us colored wristbands which designated which groups we were in. And after a little while, we got a nice round of applause and headed off into a second holding area where they did have some Switch 2 units on display and some Switch 2 units that you could get hands-on with to try out some of the new features. The locking mechanism with the magnets, many people have said, feels really solid, certainly far more solid than on the original Switch or Switch OLED. And the little buttons you hit in the back basically poke out a little piece that pokes the magnets away from each other to separate them. So that's how the sides come off. You click that button in the back and it pushes away from the base of the Switch 2. Definitely seemed far sturdier than the original. There's not going to be any, putting it on the wrong way or those types of things, because you're going to have your triggers at the top so you'll know what the right and left are, and they just magnetize in. And it seems like a really smart way to adapt to a system that was working but could be improved on. So the first unit that we got to touch was actually not a live unit, although there did seem to be a battery charge in the Joy-Cons. So basically you just got to pick it up, hold it in your hands, utilize those little buttons, get a feel for how that all went, as well as the size. Definitely bigger than a Switch, probably pretty similar to a Switch OLED. I didn't bring one to check it out. You can check for some other reviewers on that and the specs, but it wasn't like a massive unit in your hand. It's definitely not something that's so chunky you wouldn't bring it anywhere, like some people feel about some of the handheld PC units like the Steam Deck. After that little area where we got to see some of the boxes on display, as well as units, the dock, and the accessories, once we were let into the next area, it was our first attempt at Mario Kart World, which I am not the biggest Mario Kart fan, but I did jump on Mario Kart back on the Switch, the original Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, just to check it out and kind of get back into the feel of it. And Mario Kart World definitely is a more premium experience than what we're used to with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Every station was manned by an individual who would walk you through some of the basics of the controls and set you up on a two-player split screen that was kind of its own circuit. So this wasn't the same as the big knockout round, which would come later. This was just me and Rose playing against a whole bunch of computers. I actually forgot that when we were playing in this mode, we were using the Joy-Cons with the little charger connector thing in the middle, which admittedly I never ever use on my Switch 1 or Switch OLED. I always use the Pro Controller or I'm using it in handheld. So that'll just kind of give you a feel for how the quality of the Joy-Cons has improved with the Switch 2. It didn't stand out to me as a really negative experience, which you could really argue the original Switch Joy-Cons are not the highest quality, and you can certainly feel how flimsy they are. The overall performance, even in split screen, was pretty much flawless. I didn't really notice any hiccups or slowdowns in frame rate or anything. The footage you're seeing was recorded at 60 frames per second, so that will give you a general idea of the flow of the game. What the difference seems to be between this and the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe we all know and love is just the little touches that take this a step beyond. All of the different animations, the way that the different carts interact, either if they're hit, they bounce off things, there definitely is a level to the mechanics of how the game works that the original Switch just would not have been up to par with. Now, in terms of the game itself, super fun. It's Mario Kart. I mean, every generation of Mario Kart has been at least good, you know, some of them great, and obviously it was a ton of fun. I think the big things that strike you about it, beyond just the look of it, the graphics, the animations of the characters, is the overall size of field. I mean that both in terms of the open worldness of the game and also in the number of competitors in the game. So I think the max is like 24, 25 characters, something like that. While that's super cool that you've got so many people competing at the same time, it can also get a little frustrating because if you get hit by, you know, a couple of things in a row, like you'll see in the footage, at one point I went from first to like 20th or something in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds just because there are so many people getting these powerful power-ups which are going to, you know, nuke you in a row, like chain stunning you. That's not something that's terribly new to Mario Kart, but I think it's a little bit stronger here just because of how many enemies can be behind you. So if you're number one, you've got 23 other characters that are all picking up power-ups that could potentially affect the entire field, like lightning or blue shell or the bullets or whatever. There are so many different power-ups. The graphics look great. The game runs fantastically. The environments are really fun, interactive. Overall, I would say that Mario Kart World certainly is a system seller for families. I don't know if it's going to be a system seller for everyone, but it's certainly a worthy Mario successor. And I think there's no doubt that this is the game that needed to be a pack-in game in terms of the launch of the Switch 2. It had to be a brand new game exclusive to Switch 2, which means it had to be a Nintendo game, obviously. And because it's really the only one that's out at this moment, it had to be this. You could have maybe argued for like Metroid Prime. However, because that's also coming out with a Switch version, I think this was the correct answer. And we'll get to why Donkey Kong Bonanza might not be a little bit later when we talk about that game. All right, so after we played through our two-player game, we did get hands-on with a live unit of the Switch 2. And again, didn't notice any huge differences in terms of the size. I do think there is an improvement in the quality of the buttons and in the thumbsticks. Now, they have made a statement that Hall effect thumbsticks are not a thing for the Switch 2, although there are a lot of people online who kind of just argue that Hall effects is the new buzzword in thumbsticks. And the big thing is just going to be over time whether or not these get stick drift. But in terms of how they feel with the interactions and using them as opposed to using something like a Pro Controller, I think this is going to be a much closer experience than the original Joy-Cons by far. And obviously anyone who's used the Switch OLED understands that those Joy-Cons aren't any better either, so this is definitely a substantial step up from the original Switch Joy-Con controllers. Now, will these last? Only time can tell, but it did feel like the thumbsticks were significantly different from the original Switch. I would say they felt a little higher quality. They may have even been, I don't know, shorter. There was something about the way you moved them that felt sturdier than the original Switch. From my point of view as someone who's played on Switch OLED, and used the Pro controllers, I thought that these were very high quality thumbsticks that probably will show up pretty well once the final units actually get out to customers. In terms of the screen of the Switch 2, because this is really the only game that I got to play in handheld holding the Switch 2, I think that it holds up extremely well despite the fact that it's not an OLED screen. It definitely is bright, it's punchy. I couldn't tell, like for HDR, whether that was on or there were a bunch of dimming zones or anything like that. It does seem like when it goes to a black screen, you can see a little bit of gray. It's certainly not that complete pitch dark black, inky black you get from an OLED display, but it's certainly contrasty enough to give you a good experience in handheld mode. Now, one interesting thing about this that I don't know the answer to yet will be, how does this look in sunlight when there are competing lights as opposed to in a dark room or fairly dark room? Each of the rooms we ended up playing the Switch in whether it was on a TV or in handheld, were in fairly dark rooms, as you'll see through the footage. So I am really curious to see if the fact that they went with the LCD means that it's going to stand out better once we get to a fully lit situation and competing lights, especially when you're talking about daylight and outside. And if you're going to sink $450 to $500 on a portable system, you certainly want to be able to play it portably in every possible scenario you can, which will certainly include daylight. So I do think that the LCD decision is partly for cost. It's also to get to that refresh rate, which will come up a little bit later in Metroid Prime. I wouldn't be shocked if the battery life is better because of the screen. I'm sure that it was less expensive to get to 240 hertz because of the screen. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually better in daylight than if they went with an OLED screen. It certainly is less expensive to go with LCD than it is with OLED, but there are still some benefits, and particularly considering the types of environments that you're going to be holding this thing in when you're in handheld mode, it makes some sense to go with the less expensive LCD with potentially higher brightness and that high refresh rate LCD, including variable refresh rate VRR in it. So those games that are running in intermediate frame rates will look that much smoother and closer to either a 60 frames or higher situation. So I'm sure there are going to be many games in the future that are going to benefit from this VRR on the screen, where otherwise you would have to have it in docked mode going to a VRR display. So this is a nice concession, a nice way to get to that higher refresh rate and the variable refresh rate to try and account for potential games in the future. And then in terms of the knockout rounds in Mario Kart World, I will just say that I was winning for quite a while, and then I got absolutely destroyed. I got chain knocked down by a whole bunch of items in a row, which can happen when you've got 23 other racers that are all trying to knock you out of there. But the game mode certainly seemed fun. I wish I got stuck in there a little bit longer, but we'll just say I got beat up pretty good, fell far enough back where, you know, you get hit right before a checkpoint, you just don't have enough time to recover, and then you get knocked out and you're done for the overall race. So there are pluses to it, there are minuses to it. It's very chaotic, and I'm excited to play more once the Switch 2 launches. So after we completed our stint with Mario Kart World, we were brought upstairs to a free play area. So once we got to the free play area, we had a lanyard that had 6 boxes on it, and each time we played a game, it would count against the box, they would write the letter in it, and at the end of it, you would move on to the next section with Donkey Kong Bonanza. So the first game that caught my eye, the first one I absolutely had to jump on, was Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Now this may be a bit of sacrilege, but I really haven't played Metroid Prime before. I do have the remaster and I haven't gotten to play it yet, so go ahead, shoot me in the comments. But one of the things that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond talks about with the Switch 2 is a 120 frames per second mode in full HD, which I believe is what they had running, because on the little sign that's up above the screen, it did say FHD or full HD 120p. It definitely looks really good. I can see how it could be toned down in terms of some of the effects and lighting to play on the original Switch, and it does feel like a cross-gen game where Mario Kart World definitely does not, and Donkey Kong Bonanza also definitely does not. Not to mention Cyberpunk just makes like absolutely no sense to try and run on original Switch hardware. I did try out the mouse effect of the Joy-Con, and there are pluses and minuses to it. The first plus is it's seamless. So you can go from holding your thumbsticks like normal to putting one down on a table or your leg or something and using it as a mouse. But the funny thing is, it actually reminds me how good playing first-person shooters on a computer with a mouse and keyboard feels. So while it was okay, your hand does end up in a little bit of a strange position when you're using the Joy-Con on a flat surface. And so hitting the face buttons and stuff does feel a little bit strange, and it just makes you wish you had a mouse. So it will be interesting to see if someone comes out with like a little Bluetooth adapter to a wireless mouse, because you would think that you could maybe map that mouse functionality that's in the Switch Joy-Con to an actual mouse. But we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. My takeaway on it was it's certainly more accurate, just like a mouse is more accurate than playing on controller, but it did leave me wanting to play with an actual mouse. So take that for what you will. Now on the controls, input latency, the environments, they all looked really good. The boss I ended up fighting was certainly like a tutorial boss. It seemed pretty tanky, and it took me a minute to kind of figure out how to kill it. And without a doubt, it will be a day one purchase for me, and certainly one of the games that I think is going to push the Switch 2 early on to its limits. In this case, it was super stable, steady frame rate, no issues whatsoever while playing, no input latency issues whatsoever, and we'll see how the game is once it's fully released, but you can tell that it has Switch 1 roots in it. So, I mean, that makes sense because of how long they've been developing this game, how long they've been talking about it. But I am really excited to get my hands on the final copy of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and I certainly enjoyed my time with it. The next game that I absolutely had to play and see how it performs on the Switch 2, because I will certainly be considering purchasing it for the Switch 2, even though it's third party, is Hades 2. Now, I understand the game is out on early access, but I am waiting for the full release of the game to really play through it. And this does not disappoint. I mean, Hades is not going to be the most demanding game, but it's the perfect type of game for handheld. That roguelike gameplay where you're doing runs, you're getting better, and it doesn't have to have super intense graphical detail, but it does have that art style, that look. It sucks you in and makes you a fan of the game. I am a big fan of the original Hades. I am extremely excited for Hades 2. And if you've played the Switch version of Hades versus one of the others, you can definitely tell there's a difference in the graphical fidelity. This certainly, the Hades 2 that I got to play, certainly looks far better than the original Hades on the Switch. Not the original Hades altogether, it's still extremely similar to the first game, but there's definitely a graphical uplift with the Switch 2, which I love to see because this is one of those games that's just a perfect handheld game. But tons of fun, looks great, plays great, super smooth, really excited for Hades 2 on the Switch 2. Now, the next big game that I absolutely had to try on the Switch 2, not that I'm going to necessarily buy it on the Switch 2 just because of how it pushes the hardware, is Cyberpunk 2077. Now, during the Switch 2 experience, I did use two different cameras. So you will see footage primarily from an Action 4, which is a little action camera that I had on me, and some of it is on my full frame camera, the Panasonic S5 IIX. So I do put in some of the footage when I was able to record when I wasn't playing, holding my full frame camera, and all of those videos are at 60 frames per second, so you can see the overall frame rate. Now with Cyberpunk 2077, it was very easy to see this game, and they've said it, does not run at 60 frames per second. Now, the frame rate it was running at is certainly playable. It's not 30, so it's better than that. I think the variable refresh rate of the screen will certainly help. Now, they did have the motion blur turned way up, and you can still tell that there are differences graphically between this and what you're going to see on a PlayStation 5 or on an Xbox Series X. I do think, and we'll talk about this in the wrap-up, I do think it doesn't compare too badly with the Series S, so that kind of gives you a decent idea where the overall performance of the Switch 2 is going to fall. So overall, is the Switch 2 the best place to play Cyberpunk 2077? No, absolutely not. It's going to be a super high-end PC, followed by probably the PlayStation 5 Pro as the second best. But the fact that it can do it just shows you the level of power of the system. The fact that it can handle it above 30 frames per second, it does seem to have some pretty advanced lighting. I don't know if they really have much in the way of ray tracing on it, although NVIDIA has confirmed there are some ray tracing cores in the Switch 2. Overall, this is just a great test of the hardware, pushing it to its limits, and the game still looks really good. Is it PlayStation 5 worthy? No, absolutely not. Is it PlayStation 4 worthy? It might be a little better than PlayStation 4. It's probably in the area, but the game was certainly playable, and if you're a Nintendo-only fan, this is going to be the first time you're able to get into the world of Cyberpunk 2077. It does include the DLC, so you're not missing out on anything, and I think it's overall a pretty good experience, especially compared to the original launch of Cyberpunk 2077, but we won't go too deep down that rabbit hole in this video. So Rose actually picked another game that's pretty demanding to play, and that was Hogwarts Legacy. And that actually did hold up pretty well from what I could see. It wasn't like next level in terms of its overall graphical fidelity, but it was certainly suitable enough. And I think this is going to be a theme of the Switch 2. If a game is really graphically intense, I still think Switch 2 is not going to be the place to play it. But if it's in that medium ground, if it's in that, yes, it has some nice things to it, yes, it has some graphical power required to run it, but it's not the tip of the spear when it comes to graphics, I think the Switch 2 will handle most games, which is a big step up from Switch 1, because there was always these incredible how did they make this happen ports that ended up on Switch 1, but there were many games that you would play on other platforms and just say, yeah, this thing's not possible to run at a good frame rate looking well on the original Switch hardware. So Hogwarts Legacy, again, looked and played seemingly just fine. At that point, I did step over and try Street Fighter 6, which is a game I have a ton of time in, of course, playing on PC and on PlayStation 5. Now, does this version hold up? I think in-game matches seem to hold up. We did not get to play any of the actual World Tour mode, which was the open world part, so I'm curious to see how that works. The games themselves played fine. I didn't notice input latency. I did get to play with the Pro Controller, but unfortunately the paddles on the back of the Pro Controller were not activated or something, and I couldn't find the settings to actually turn them on. I tried to go into the button setup and do it that way, and there was just no way to do it. But I will say the Pro Controller did feel like an improvement over the prior ones, a little more substantial, although the D-pad was not that exciting for me. I did feel like I got some misinputs using the Pro Controller D-pad. It could be that because so many different people were playing with it, maybe they're playing rough with it, I'm not sure. But I was not thrilled with the D-pad, but the overall feel of the controller and those back buttons did seem to be in the right place and felt totally natural. It's just that they didn't do anything when I used them. But Street Fighter 6 plays very well on the Switch 2. Overall for Street Fighter 6, definitely good experience. I think in-game is going to be totally fine. I think it's going to be interesting to see the online play. I assume it should be good because I believe the dock does have an Ethernet connection, and even on Wi-Fi, I think they said it was Wi-Fi 6 or something. So you should actually get a decent Wi-Fi connection. In-game, I think will be totally fine. Did not get to play World Tour, and the screen at the beginning where the two characters face each other and make funny faces, that one did not look great. Had some aliasing on it. Not the greatest. At that point, we ended up playing a bunch of games in Mario Party Jamboree. This was to test out the mouse functionality as well as the camera, which is a pretty interesting little accessory. So in terms of the mouse functionality, you can definitely see where getting an extra set of Joy-Cons and having them for this play mode can certainly be a fun family affair. Basically, a whole bunch of different games to use the mouse functionality. So the games were fun. The mouse functionality seemed to work really, really well. And I definitely can see how this even adds to the family fun aspects of the Switch. And then we ended up playing Mario Party Jamboree games that actually used the camera. Now the camera is kind of cool because you just pop it on and then it actually picks out the background and removes it from each of the people. So in this case, we played 4 players and it removed the backgrounds from each of the 4 players and separated them on the screen, which is pretty cool technology. It's certainly going to be like gimmicky and certainly going to have its use cases, but it is cool that it seems to be pretty plug and play and easy to do. There was no adjusting to it or anything like that, at least not from what we saw. The person who was setting it up for it literally just walked over, looked like they hit a button to turn it on, and bam, we were on the screen. We just had to maybe move slightly to make sure we were in the right area. You show up on the screen, your background's removed. Is it 100% perfect? No, but considering it's a 1080p camera, I mean, and it's only $55, I think, after the price increases went through. Overall, fun mini games, very interesting technology that they didn't go for a super high-res camera, but they were able to put in this really strong background removal tool and separating out and identifying individuals and getting all 4 of us on the screen separated and using different sections of the sensor for each of the individual people in the group. So you really were separate. It wasn't just like throwing us on the screen and keeping us there all the time. It would go to different sections where Bowser would like point to us and we were supposed to yell or whatever. So it wasn't like an always on kind of thing. It definitely has some technology and some thought behind it, which makes it pretty interesting. And then finally, we ended up playing Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now, when this came out from the original Nintendo Direct, I was thinking to myself, that's a pretty damn cool idea. Being able to just be as Donkey Kong and literally destroy the world and slam through the ground and find all this hidden stuff. It is still cool after playing it, but there are some things that I have come to realize after playing the game hands-on. The first is, this is one of the games that I think ran the worst on the Switch 2. I think probably Cyberpunk 2077 ran the actual worst. Not that it ran badly, but it definitely wasn't at 60 frames per second. But there's something slightly to Donkey Kong Bonanza that's a little bit janky. I think I saw Digital Foundry identified that some of the particles and when things are colliding and interacting, it's not at 60 frames, so it seems like a little weird. And the game definitely seems very sandboxy. It doesn't feel like a focused game. I mean, it has a lot of style to it. It's definitely modeled after a less serious or going after like a less serious nature. So it doesn't have this super deep story or anything like that that's gonna suck you in. It definitely feels like the type of game that isn't going to be that engrossing. It's more just for the experience of being Donkey Kong and basically smashing the world. I think there are some technical aspects to Donkey Kong which are really cool. Obviously, being able to punch in any direction, dig into the ground, find all kinds of secrets and those types of things, that's all cool stuff. Being able to throw things or grab pieces of ground or rock or whatever and use it to hit enemies. There are boss fights in it. It reminded me a little bit of Mario Odyssey, although I think that Mario Odyssey is more focused and a cleaner experience than Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now again, this isn't the final version. Donkey Kong Bonanza is not a launch game, so we are still a little bit of ways out. We'll see what the final game looks like. But Donkey Kong Bonanza seems fun. It doesn't seem like a really tailored experience. It's more like a drop you in a sandbox and let you smash things up and see what happens from there. I did like it. I'm curious to see the final version. Again, we were using Pro controllers to play Donkey Kong Bonanza, if I'm remembering correctly. And they made a big point of this game. So after you completed your lanyard and had everything filled in, Donkey Kong Bonanza was the game they wanted everyone to play. So the only two games they made everyone play were Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart World. Mario Kart World is a launch game and definitely seems like it's ready for launch and is going to be a really polished game that's ready to go. Donkey Kong Bonanza is coming later, I think in July, so a month and a half later. And it does not feel as polished. It's also less expensive. You know, people were up in arms about the price on Mario Kart World, which I don't blame you, 80 bucks for a Mario Kart game. The thing I was waiting for to see if they would do it would be to say, hey, DLC is coming with more tracks, more characters, but it's free, it's included in the cost of the game. Then I think people would have been like, all right, you got me, fine. You're gonna give me free DLC, then I'll live with it. As opposed to what they've done with these expansion packs and everything on Nintendo Switch Online service, so. The game that I didn't play that I really wanted to, but we were running out of time, was The Legend of Zelda. Both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were there and seemed to be running at a full 60 frames per second. I did grab a brief glimpse of footage with things looking super smooth, but because we were running out of time before our group was supposed to go to Donkey Kong Bonanza, unfortunately, I didn't get to play the game. But because it's an upgrade, it's definitely one that I'm going to try once the Switch 2 launches. What are my overall thoughts of the Switch 2 at this point? I think the power of the Switch 2 is going to fall somewhere between a PlayStation 4 and an Xbox Series S. Maybe it gets to Series S level, but considering it's a handheld unit, that's not really a bad thing. And the big selling point with Nintendo is always going to be their exclusive games. You play Nintendo for Mario, you play it for Zelda, you play it for Metroid, you play it for those first-party games that you cannot play anywhere else, and you know they're not going to be anywhere else. This isn't Xbox giving up, you know, Indiana Jones and Starfield and whatever else to PlayStation and Sony. This is Nintendo. They don't do that. They don't allow their games to go anywhere else. So if you're going to play them, if you're interested in them, this is where you have to be. The other thing is obviously, if you have a collection of Switch games, much like I do, this is going to be the best way to play them. I said the same thing when the PlayStation 5 Pro launched, that the best place to play PlayStation 5 games is going to be the Pro. It's really the best place to play anything on a console currently. And the same is going to be true for the Switch. The Switch 2 is going to be the best place to play your Switch library. Now, one concern I have is that there are not going to be a lot of launch games for the Switch 2 that you're not going to just get a Switch game and upgrade it. So Mario Kart World is obviously the primary one. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will be another one that you'll probably just pick up the Switch 2 version rather than buying Switch 1 and upgrading. But Legend of Zelda, both of them, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you're going to upgrade. Jamboree, you're going to upgrade. Some games you're going to get free upgrades on. In fact, I even picked up a game that I swore I wasn't going to buy because it's going to get a free upgrade. And that is this game right here, Pokemon Scarlet. I ended up picking up on a deal from Woot. So Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are going to get an upgrade that is free for Switch 2. So it was finally time to jump on that and buy it on a discount. So after finishing up with Donkey Kong Bonanza, we got our hands on our Switch 2 swag, which including these backpacks, which I think now are going up for, $150 to $200, $300 on eBay. It's a pretty cool little knapsack here. Obviously, you've got your Switch 2 logo. You've got your little straps there. It's got this pouch here, which I think this is probably designed to kind of carry a laptop or maybe your Switch 2. Then they've got a couple of netted sections there. And then you've got this bottom bit here, which this probably could hold a Switch 2, judging by the size. Although they didn't think this strap out very well because the strap goes pretty close. It's kind of hard to open that. Nah, maybe you could put a Switch or a Switch 2 in there. And then it's padded here, which is very nice. Overall, pretty cool. Little pocket there. Switch 2 bag ready to go for the Switch 2 once it comes in on launch. Hopefully this was helpful to you if you didn't get a chance to go out to one of those Switch 2 experiences. I know they were only held in a few select locations around the world. I got super lucky and I wanted to share all that with you. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts on the Switch 2? Was this helpful in making your buying decision? And what questions do you have for me after getting hands-on with the Switch 2 that I can help you with ahead of the launch of the Switch 2? As always, this is Pirates from Pirates Gaming saying thank you for watching. And until next time, I will see you there.